Hello, listeners slash viewers, aka viewers. That's how I'm going to start it every single time now, because I came up with it. Why not
Well,
use
that
it?
means that they don't have to start listening for 10 seconds into the podcast. No, if you want to save time, don't listen to the first 10 seconds. You know what's going to happen.
Look, we are maximizing your opportunities here, listeners slash viewers, aka viewers. I am Sophie Green, and I am with.
Rachel Johns, I think that's my
Oh,
name.
you had to think of. I did think.
I'm a little bit unwell this week, and I think it's finally going to my head. So this will be interesting. Yeah, I was saying that I haven't been sick all year. I haven't had a cold or anything like that. And I managed to escape the RWA, which is Romance Writers Australia conference lurgy that usually happens afterwards. I was tired, but I didn't get sick. But now I've got it. But you know what? I'm going on tour in like 4 weeks. So if I'm going to be sick, now is the time rather than in 4 weeks. So I've got my
Yeah,
tissues here. I've got the water. If I start coughing, I'll put myself on mute and you can lead the show.
and cough away. And feel free to turn your camera off if it's a big hacking cough. Like it's like a full
My
body.
cough is not too bad.
Experience.
It's more my nose at the moment and throat. But yeah, just in case.
Look, it happens. You've done well. You've done well. You've had so much travel. You've been around a lot of people. You've been in confined spaces. If this is, we're in September at the time we're recording. So if this is as long as it's lasted you for the whole year without an illness.
Yeah, I know. I'm pretty
But
happy with that considering all the travel and stuff that has happened. So
yeah,
yes.
yeah. But listen
Anyway,
to
we don't want to bore everyone to tears with my lurgy.
uh, look. You're making a sweeping presumption that they are bored, Rach. People might be actually quite interested in your logo.
What else? Well, I'm not interested. So, what have you been up to, Sophie?
Well, I've been thinking a bit about the fact that I always say there's enough time to write manuscripts because I am very strapped for time. But I've mentioned before I write on the ferry to and from work,
Mm.
and I'm now writing. I'm taking my own advice. I'm writing in 5 to 10 minute increments,
Wow. And so,
here and there.
how is the manuscript going?
Well, it's fine. It's the same as it ever was. And I have done these little increments before, probably not as many as I'm doing now, but because the story's always with me,
Yeah, yeah,
as soon as I go back to it, I'm like, just like, oh yeah, here I am
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And
So
so I
you
just
have you're confident you'll meet your deadline.
look, confidence a really big word, Rach.
I'm not confident I'll meet mine, and
But
mine's after yours.
I have to. So that's the thing, is that in the way of manipulating time, I just realized, oh, got my microphone close. So excuse me if you're hearing a change in
I love
volume.
it how you say you'll have to, and I'm like, deadlines are made to be broken, like rules.
It's look, I have to because there's a freelance editor who's been booked is the
Yeah.
nature of it, and I've been told before that that's the priority. So, and if I sound bitter saying that, I might be slightly, but she's a lovely freelance editor, and I do not want to muck her
Mess
around.
her around.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So I'll just get it done, and I will get it done in the increments with the occasional long spurt, and I will enjoy it. That's the other thing is that it is if we approach it thinking, oh, I've got to fit this in. I don't want to have to do it,
Oh,
rather than,
100%.
oh, I'm going back to my lovely story. Then it
Yes.
does feel hard, but this doesn't feel hard.
I
I'm
think
just irritated that I don't have more
yeah,
time.
I hear ya. Although I think time is not my problem so much as I don't feel like with my book, I've done enough research into some of the topics and I feel like I've got far. I've got 40,000 words and I'm happy with them. I love those 40,000 words. But let's face it, my books are usually 120 to 130,000 words. So we're only just in the beginning.
But you have in previous books thought you could bring it down. You don't necessarily
I've
write.
tried, but like I can kind of tell like because I know, you kind of know what's still got to come, even though I haven't got a huge massive plot. This book, because it's a sliding doors timeline, I have got more idea of the plot because I've had to kind of go, well, this has to happen in both timelines. Where's it going to happen? And
Mhm.
so I know what the midpoint is, I think, of the book, and I've still got a bit to go before then. And I'm
Okay.
pretty so I know that it's not going to be one of my shorter books. But yeah, I just feel like I've done really well with the first 40,000 words and it kind of flowed. But now I'm at a point where I need to do some research about some things, fortune telling, um, tarot, and also Alzheimer's and a few other. And I feel like I need to do that before I can go any further. If that makes sense.
This is not detail you feel you can leave for the next round.
No, I feel like for me, I just don't work that way. I
Okay.
need to have it all kind of as I'm going. I don't really have a next round. I like having my book to be, I was late on my last book. I was going to talk about this with my publisher this week, The Lucky Sisters, which comes out very soon. Might
I'm
be
reading
out
it
by
at the
the time.
moment.
Oh, I think I might even be out by the time we've released this. But those were probably the lightest structural edits I've ever had. I think my process is starting to take longer, but I think more.
Mhm.
And so, and I can already see that's probably what would happen with this one. Um, so yeah, but it means inevitably not necessarily meeting the original deadline. And also, I'm writing two books at once, so let's
Well,
not
the
say.
thing is, as I've said before, because I was copy editing meanwhile in Mount Mary Glen, which is on pause,
Yes,
you're
until one of these next books is finished.
yeah, you're a clean writer, and by that, from an industry point of view, that means a writer who does not need a lot of work on the line
Mm,
necessarily. You don't make many typos, if any. You don't require intensive editing. So I think the time you're spending now, if you are to run late, for example, um, is time that you're spending putting together a manuscript that's actually not going to need a huge amount of work on
I
the other.
hope so.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'm actually a lot earlier than I was. Like this time last year, I hadn't even started The Lucky Sisters, I realized today.
Ah, well,
And in a month, I know I had 10,000 words left to go. I know. I'm just, yeah, having a usual spiral panic. But it's also because I've got two books due basically end of
yeah.
the year, beginning of the year. So if it was just one, I would be like, yeah, it'll be fine. But as there's two, and one of those is a co-written book, so I owe it to somebody else to, yeah, I'm not sure for me, writing two books at once is the best use of my headspace.
It's been an experience for you. Who knows if you will repeat it?
We'll definitely keep writing together, but I think what we will do is allocate our years better.
Yeah.
Like we're kind of like now, we just have to get through the next few months and then make it better. But you know, we'll see how we go.
There you go. Now, today's episode of Dear Rach and Soph, which will be one of, if not the last of the year, depending on whether or not our last guest for the year actually turns up. Because at the time we're recording, this guest has unfortunately had to reschedule. And we're not
Yes,
saying who it is in case they don't appear at
no,
any point. So this may be the last you're listening to or watching Lures. And it's one that I'm really interested to have because it's about audiobooks. So we're going to talk to Chiara Priorelli from Wavesound, which is an audiobook producer or publisher. We might find out which term they prefer. Some of you will have heard of
yeah, good idea.
BOLINDA audio and Audible, which is Amazon does its own audio original. So there's a lot happening in the audiobook space, which
Mm,
I wanted to speak to someone. And Wavesound have produced the audiobook of Lessons in Love at the Seaside Salon, my latest novel. So I have that connection with them, and I was on an email chain with Chiara, and I'd already spoken to you, Rachel, about us doing an episode on audiobooks, and so I just asked the question, and here we are. So it'll
that's
be
awesome. Before she comes in, can I just ask you a quick question?
sure.
Do you listen to audiobooks, Sophie?
I do actually. I'm surprising myself with how much audio I'm listening to, and I think it's
Yeah.
because between uh, commute. So I write on the ferry, but I have to get to to get to the
Yeah,
ferry.
yeah.
Sometimes I'm on the bus to work, and I'm audiobooking it. But if I'm walking up from Circular Quay to the office, for example, I'm listening to an audiobook a lot.
Yeah.
I'm doing it with housework.
Yeah,
Went
me
for
too.
this
Housework is my
morning.
big one.
Yeah.
I'm just umming and ahhing about whether to download the next Rachel John's book club, actually, because my house needs a lot of attention tomorrow. I was away last weekend and my husband's in a new job. And so it's just, I'm like, I need to listen to this book and I need to clean. So I think I'll be downloading that one for tomorrow's inevitable housework.
Now, if I look at my own consumer behavior around this, it is my increase in audiobook listening is because of Spotify. So I have a Spotify premium
Interesting.
membership, which I have because of music. And there are 15 hours of audiobook listening included in the premium membership. This is not an ad for
No,
Spotify.
no.
But
Although
it's just
Spotify, if
meant
you'd like to sponsor us.
exactly. But It has meant because most books are not 15 hours long. So it means that I can usually do a book and a half.
True. I was going to say, because I've had friends, I've got an Audible membership. My husband and I share it because he listens to much more because he drives a bit. But I was wondering about the Spotify because I've had other friends who were like, oh, they just started to finish a book and they didn't quite finish it in time because,
15 hours right now,
So what
yes.
happens then? Do you have to then buy it to listen to the end, or do you have to wait?
Or you just wait. You can
you wait
wait
till the next,
yeah.
And you can keep listening to the same book.
That's right. So I've done that where I've just been like 2 days or something off the next one starting.
Yeah, yeah. I might have to
But
investigate. Well, other thing I was gonna say, I know she's probably here. Is she here yet?
not yet, not in the waiting room
Okay.
yet.
I was gonna say then, the other thing is I was away last weekend with a bunch of authors, and we had a lot of industry chats and stuff, and we were talking about audiobooks and how, um, for some people in particular, audiobook is creeping up now on their royalty statement to be almost as much as print, which I'm pretty sure for me, print is still king, but audio is getting bigger and bigger. I wonder if in certain genres it's even, and that's maybe something to ask Chiara, because you might know as well the publishing, because I'm thinking, truckies have always listened to audiobooks, right? And they're probably going to be listening to your crime more and your action kind of type thrillers and stuff.
Well, depending.
And they do listen to our books too. We do know that.
Yeah, we do. And that's the thing about audio is that it's that no one can tell what you're listening to, right? So it may be that they are listening to a Rachel Johns book, where it's not something that they would necessarily hold up in the truck in print. For various reasons, and that's not for us to say or to judge, right?
100%.
And certainly I've seen as a nonfiction publisher that there are certain nonfiction books. Nonfiction until Spotify actually was not much of a player in the audiobook space, but I'm seeing some genres.
It's not a word.
Some nonfiction books actually have there have been more audiobooks sold than ebooks, and some of them are approaching the print level. So it is really, really interesting. I'm just going into my questions because Chiara is in the waiting room now.
Yay!
I'm going to put us on pause and let her in. So here we go. Rachel, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Chiara Priorelli or Priorelli. I might be mispronouncing that.
No, Priorelli, you got it perfectly. You got it perfectly first up.
From Wavesound, whom I'm very happy to meet on Zoom, and I'm sure you are too, Rachel.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to talk audiobooks.
As am I. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And this is part of the reason for wanting to have this conversation on this podcast episode, Chiara, is that I noticed doing some events last year that for the first time I had people saying, oh, I'm not buying a book for you to decide. I've listened to the audiobook. And
I've had that.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it with other books as well. So this is an interesting shift. I'm personally very interested in the audio space and how I think it's a return to the original storytelling, which was oral, and also believe that it opens up storytelling and books generally to people with print disabilities, for example, who have never felt welcomed into publishing and books for the obvious reason that it was in print. But before we get into the meat of that, I'd love to know about how you came to work in audiobooks and at Wavesound.
Well, I began my career in print publishing. So I worked for HarperCollins in London in the publicity department, primarily on nonfiction books. And then I sort of
well, you two have a lot in common then, because Sophie is a nonfiction publisher.
There you go. I sort of did it backwards. So I started in sort of the more corporate publishing, and then I moved to a smaller publishing house, Allison and Busby, it's still in London. And there I really got, it was very hands-on, as in all businesses that are small. So I was doing not just publicity, but then designing the website, even got to do some cover design and then acquisition. So really it was being part of the book from, beginning to end, and, talking to the retailers and all that. So when I then I came to beautiful Australia, I knew I wanted to stay with books. That's my passion. But it was hard to know, where do I go from here? I've sort of, I've been doing a bit of everything. And then I was very lucky. It wasn't, we're talking 10 years ago now, and audio was not where it was today. But so Wavesound is part of a huge global group, RB Media, And at the time, they had our sister office is WF House in the UK, and our head office is Recorded Books in the US. And they didn't have an Australian arm that was buying local content. So they were distributing all the international content into the Australian market, but didn't have anyone here buying. And I was approached, and it was very serendipitous because it essentially was starting up, one could say, like a small a publishing house, and
Wow.
being the one to select what gets made in audio, right sort of to the end when we're selling the product to the retailer. So it really fit me incredibly well. And before I was not I wasn't listening to audio, and now of course I'm a complete convert. But the most exciting part was Wavesound. The Wavesound imprint is dedicated to Australian and New Zealand authors, and that was, although there was obviously audio being produced here, it was a very small, finite amount. And when I came on board, it was that there is so much that hasn't been made into audio yet, and all this great talent which isn't being produced in audio. So we've come a long way. We started with producing 3 titles a month, and now we're up to 18.
Wow, amazing.
So a real big jump.
And
So
do the narrators, like all the production happens in Australia, so you get your own narrators and stuff here as well?
yeah, so we work with various studios. We have 2 primary studios that we work with here. Then obviously if the book requires UK accents or is set elsewhere, then we can record in the UK. So it's wherever it needs to be done. But now with more authors doing their own audio, or somebody might be based in Tassie, so we've got studio contacts pretty much everywhere.
Wow.
But yeah, so we keep it here when we can.
So for anyone who's interested about authors doing their own audio, so as a publisher, I actually have to organize some authors who are narrators as well. And now it's not an automatic process because the authors have to do a voice test, especially which may surprise some readers who think, well, particularly if it's a memoir, wouldn't that just be automatically the case? But Chiara, it'd be great to hear from you about the attributes that a narrator needs, especially if they're not a professional like an actor, because of course the author who wants to be a narrator is being compared with an actor who has experience and training usually in this sort of thing.
Of course. So I totally get it. As being an author, it's your baby. You've created this gem of a book. Your characters. So I think it's natural for an author to think, I am the one who's going to know how to bring this book to life because I know my characters. I know what they're supposed to sound like. But it is such a specific skill to be able to narrate. So I'll talk about fiction first. That is definitely a sort of even brilliant theater actors or film and TV actors don't necessarily make for great audio narrators. Because you are dealing with not only reading, you're not just it's not like you're performing a character, you're actually reading text and how to bring writing to life that's engaging without being too over performative, or where you want the listener to forget that they're being read to. They just want to immerse themselves in the story, so you kind of forget that there's a voice speaking to you. So finding that balance. And then when it comes to dialogue, and you might have 3 characters speaking in this, with different accents or just different voices, and you have to be able to switch from one to the other. And that in itself, I'll never forget the first time I went into the studio. So this is 10 years ago, first ever time in an audio studio, and we had Rupert Degas reading Solari Gentile's Roland Sinclair series. And so this is my first experience sort of listening to somebody do it. And he's went in studio, and it was a scene which had 7 different characters. One was British, one was Australian, And I got goosebumps because it was just like how you were just listening and it was just seamless. It was bum, 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 bum. And
Wow.
that's where I realized, wow, this is, this is a true skill. So certainly for fiction, we would always recommend that it's done by a professional. When it comes to nonfiction, yes, there is, especially if it's a memoir, there is that desire that you do want to hear from the author themselves. That said, there are studies that have been done. There was a big survey which actually showed, surprisingly perhaps, that audio listeners would actually prefer to have a good narrator rather than listen to an author, if obviously the author isn't up to scratch. And I think it's just natural for us to think, well, I'd want to hear from the author, because you just assume they're going to be good. They're just going to be like, everyone is fine reading a book. But actually, a decision has to be made as to whether that author is capable and have that skill to really bring their book to life. And because when you read a book, you want the writing, which is can be an incredible, most authors are obviously great writers, and you want that to transfer well into audio. So you don't want to do the writing a disservice just because somebody isn't a great narrator.
And a narrator, I do a couple of book club podcasts and a book club online, and we often talk about, because half, well, not half, but many of the people will listen to the audiobook. My co-host on my other podcast, which is a reading podcast, almost always listens to the audiobook, and we always talk about how a narrator can make or break an audio. I've turned off books that probably I might have liked in print because I just didn't gel with the audio. And then other books I've listened to, I've thought, you know what, if I was reading this in print, I don't know if I would have gone along with it, but they do take you kind of in a journey and the entertainment. So the narrator's voice is really important. Do your authors get to choose who, like, because my audiobooks, I've always had a choice between, like, usually 3 or 4 samples, but often it's really hard. I find that just listening to snippets, even if it's them reading my own book, it's very hard. And I don't think, for me, I'm necessarily the best judge, because as you said, you're listening, like, I would, in one way I'd love to read my own audiobooks because I think it would be fun. Another way, I think no way, because I hate the sound of my voice when I hear it. And so I would be, and I couldn't do all the accents and all those things. But when only once have I listened to one of my audiobooks, and only the beginning, I couldn't go any further. Not because the audio recording wasn't great. Plenty of people loved it and raved about it. But I listened to, there's a dear reader letter at the beginning, and I listened to that. So that's like from me, and it was read in a totally different way than I would, with emphasis on different words, and so I just don't think, as an author, I'm necessarily the best judge to choose the audio narrator, but we do get the choice.
Yeah, we do. The way we work, we do the casting. We'll obviously filter who we think is best, and we usually have our preference, recommendation. So we'll put forward our recommendation, and then often there might be a runner-up or maybe 2, and they might bring something that's slightly different to the table. And so when we always send it to the author for their approval and any feedback, obviously, because sometimes it's most of the auditions, they're cold reads, so it's not like the person auditioning is going to have gotten to know the characters really.
They haven't had a chance to read the book yet.
So it's really just hearing their skill, the sound of their voice, whether the author sort of gels with it. But it is, we also know some of these narrators, so we know what their skill is, we know what they're capable of. So sometimes, an audition might come in, and or an author might recommend, someone, but we just know, because we do this all the time, right, that they're just not, they probably aren't quite the right fit, even though the author might think they are. But the fact is, as you say, the narration is so subjective. So I might love someone
Mm.
20 other people might love them, hundreds other people might love them. I mean, we get so many times where we've got 5-star reviews, people going, best narration ever, now is my, and then without a doubt, there might be reviewers who are just, oh, couldn't listen to this person's voice.
Yeah. It's the
So
same
you're
with
never,
novel books, right? Or,
yeah.
you know,
So you're never gonna please anyone. There
no,
isn't
definitely
the
not.
right perfect voice, but you hope
Yeah.
that you do want to make sure that the author is
Yeah.
happy, and just we try. I mean, the way we work, I really do believe in that. It's an extension of the author's work. So we try to be as, collaborative as possible, and, involve them just so they understand the process. So it's not
Yeah.
a question, we do feel we're the experts, but it's just about making, often making them understand our thought process, because
Yes.
often authors might make some comments, and then you go, oh, but this is the reason why we couldn't do it like that. And I'm like, oh, oh, I see, I get it. Yeah. And it's just making people educating them. Really.
Yeah, it's a different art form, and Rachel and I had an experience earlier this year, I think it was, where so the Booker Prize winner from last year, Orbital by Samantha Harvey, I'd listened to the audiobook. Rachel had read it in print, and it's a slender book.
Yeah.
I'd loved it. And
That's
I
true.
actually, and then Rachel, you did not love it. And we were discussing the fact that it was perhaps because I'd listened to the audiobook that I loved it, because the narrator had quite an unusual accent. And initially I thought, oh, can I listen? It was more that I couldn't quite place it. So I was getting distracted. And then after a little while, I just couldn't imagine anyone else reading it. And the way she narrated it, it had this feeling to it, because it's about astronauts orbiting the Earth. She actually had this rhythm to her voice that kind of implied that, and it was this mesmeric experience. And I just, well, I can't imagine reading that in print now.
So she said that she's the perfect pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. Audio, when it's done well, it can really enhance one's experience of something, or just provide a different experience. I always say it's nothing better. I still love reading a print book as much as I love listening to audio. It's just a different experience. And I remember it was we published Tim Winton's The Shepherd's Hut, and we had Kate Mulvaney read that. And again, this was sort of early on, and not being Australian, having her read it, it was fantastic for me, because I'm like, I think I would have missed certain nuances, certain, and that it just completely brought the book, to life for me. So it's definitely, when it's done well, it's wonderful.
As you said a minute ago, like obviously it's not for everyone all the time. Like I don't completely listen in audio, but I listen to audio a lot when I clean the house, which pity I didn't listen to more, or my house would be, better. But I do love the experience of reading a book. But I love that audio, I can do it while I'm driving. I can do it while I'm, I could do it. I've got friends who do it while they knit or crochet, draw, do other things. And so, yeah, I'm wondering, you said that you didn't used to listen to much audio before you got into this job. What do you do when you're like, do you do things when you're listening? Is that one of the reasons you like about it? Because you can almost read more than you would be able to otherwise?
I do. The downside of my job is that I'm reading so many manuscripts, and I don't have a lot of time. Yeah. I'm sure you can. So I'm reading. I can't remember truly the last time I read something for pleasure from cover to cover. But having said that, the beauty is I'm reading across everything, and discovering obviously new incredible writers. So I would say I probably I'm probably reading more manuscripts, and then listening to more audio for my own pleasure. Because yes, if I've got time to actually sit down with a book, inevitably it's reading. Okay, what am I going to acquire next? Whereas if I'm actually doing something or commuting, then I'll listen to audio. Yeah.
So do you have a sense, Chiara, of your list? Because for anyone who's not aware, publishers have lists basically. And so you have to look at what else is on the list and and what goes with it. And I mean, I'm guessing you do have a sense of your list, but you said
Yes.
that it's grown from 3 titles a month to 18 titles a month. That's also a process of you reconfiguring what your lists, what you would like your list to be, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, to be honest, there's nothing that we don't publish. So we really, whatever I think is going to sell in audio, we will publish. So we cover all genres, um, definitely with a focus on adult fiction and nonfiction rather than children's. And that's simply just the audio market. There's less of a market for the children's side of things, which may seem surprising because you think, oh, children, they might not read, you want to stick an audio. But when you think of how people do consume audio, which is commuting, doing the cleaning, exercising, they're not, there's a smaller fraction of consumers who will literally just sit down quietly and plug into an audio and sort of, and just listen, maybe as they're falling asleep.
Yeah.
So you're not, so those moments when you can get a child to sort of sit quietly and
In the
just plug
car.
in. Yeah, in the car, exactly.
Because we used to live in the country, and when my kids were little, they're now like 17, 19, 21, and I can't force them to read or listen if they don't want to. But we used to be on long drives a lot of the time, and I have always been a little bit of a screen control freak.
Yep.
I don't want them on there all the time. Thank goodness it was in a
With you.
I was able to do that a lot easier when they were young because there wasn't so many opportunities now. But in the car, we used to always listen to audiobooks. And it just made, if I didn't have an audiobook for them, because most of this was in the CD era, right?
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
didn't have an audiobook, they would fight the whole time and bicker and stuff. But if we had an audiobook, we listened to, the Narnia books, we listened to Folk of the Faraway Tree, we listened to even Anne of Green Gables with 3 boys. We listened to a lot of Andy Griffith's books, and of course all the Harry Potter, and it just made our journeys so much more pleasant. Roald Dahl. So if there are any parents listening to this, I can't recommend enough audiobooks for car journeys.
Absolutely. No,
It just
absolutely.
is amazing.
Yeah, we stuck on Runt by Craig Silvey
Yes.
for our last one, and yeah, the kids were hooked. So yeah, so there's definitely a place for it, and we do publish.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I just thought I'd interrupt and say that if anyone's listening, listen to them for your car.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, definitely works. It definitely works, absolutely. And even I've had those moments where I'm just like, I just need 20 minutes, and it's the novelty even of it. Just listen to this, and they're like, ooh, this is different, so
yeah.
So there is definitely that space for it, but there's just not as
big a market.
It's just not a bigger market.
Yeah.
And it's also to do with how people buy audiobooks. There's a lot of subscription models.
Yeah.
So somebody's going, okay, I've got my 1 credit a month.
I'm not giving it to my kids.
Yeah. And like, what am I going to spend it on? Am I going to spend it on a 12-hour book, or am I going to spend it on a 2-hour book? So all these things come into play. Even when it comes to sales.
Yeah, definitely.
So what were we saying? Yes, I'm across the list. Across the genres, and it tends to mirror what's selling in print, or in print and ebooks. So that's what we look to. That's what we look to buy, and obviously following the trends. I have a personal passion for debut writers. Discovering them.
That's awesome.
From the beginning, and and to be honest, that's really how we made it. How Wavesound really made a name for ourselves, because we backed Jane Harper and Chris Hammer.
Backed people that maybe the other companies weren't backing at that time.
Yeah,
and now kicking themselves.
Yeah, or just going, okay, audio. Before it was more the established authors, and we sort of came in and was all about, okay, this is who are the new exciting new names, and I still I'm very proud of that, and also working with authors long term. When we came, I couldn't believe that Gary Disher had never been done in audio, and and now we're his audio publisher. He's produced, I think, bar a couple is an audio now, and there's something.
But that's interesting. For any people listening, obviously you're not afraid of a book that's been out for a while sometimes.
Yeah, correct. I think right now our list, even though we publish over 200 books a year, It's still relatively small. So definitely front list is our bread and butter and what we look to do. And yet we do pick up backlist. If it's backlist that is still ticking on really strongly, some of our backlist titles are still in our top 10. And authors who are selling really well, they're front list, but audio, when their first 3 books were out, audio wasn't around or wasn't there. So we're looking to sort of fill those gaps. But it's just, as Sophie, you have so many books that you can publish a year, and you have to, take a few where you can, then it just takes longer to sort of get those.
You mentioned trends and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think certain genres are more popular in audio? Like, crime maybe because it's more of a male listenership and they're often truck drivers, or not often truck drivers. Don't get cancelled saying men are often truck drivers. That's not what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely think crime and thrillers is a staple of audio, and it's certainly when a crime book comes my way, it's like, okay, we gotta take a look at this one for sure. Yes, because there is the male, women tend to be, or this is a generalization, but obviously the bigger readers. Men who might not be book readers, they do listen to audio. But it's also, I think, a genre where people are more likely to give audio a go. If they're going to just, okay, I'm just going to try, they might not try, a literary fiction and audio if they haven't dipped their toe into audio, but a beach read or something like a crime and thriller, so that tends to have a big market. Certainly now, romance, rom-coms. I think the first 6 years on my list probably had a couple of rom-com titles coming out of Australia, and now every month I'm getting pitched left, right, and center. So, so for sure, which has been great. And
so it does really follow the trends that are going on in the general.
In the general public,
Do you
but then
see
there are some definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, definitely with that male, anything that's sort of male skewed, so true crime, and I think that comes from the podcast. Podcasts, certainly the rise of podcasts definitely helped boost the audio market. Some people who listen to true crime podcasts, suddenly that's an easy shift. And things that are, your action thrillers, even military memoirs, that sort of thing. So definitely the male skew can sometimes perform well in audio that or better than print. And then there are that memoirs, if it is read by the author and read well and they have that celebrity side to them, then it can do very well. I mean, it would do very well in print as well, but
but some narrators I know are becoming like almost celebrities themselves in terms
especially in the romance space.
And people will pick, I hear many people now say that when they get a narrator that they like, they'll look for the books that the narrator has read, rather than necessarily look for books by authors. So I mean, for us authors, that shows how important getting the right narrator can be as well. But I think it's also interesting that people are discovering books through narrators.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly within the same genre, I think they would. That sort of cross promotion.
I'm just thinking how much I thought about this before when you first mentioned audiobooks, and how they are becoming a whole load more again. But remember at school, one of my favorite things at school was to have, there'd be this corner in the classroom where you had a tape deck kind of thing, and then there was like 5 or 6 people would sit around it, and you'd put the headphones on and you'd listen in group to an audio book. So I really have fun memories of that. So I just want to randomly mention that.
I was thinking exactly that the other day, where I must have been maybe 8, and we had the record player underneath the stairs, this little nook thing. And I remember coming home from school, and I'd go and I'd listen to, Peter Ustinov's something, and Cinderella, and
Yes, I
on the
remember too.
record player,
Yeah,
and then it's sort of, I kind of
died out.
completely forgotten about. I'd forgotten
Well, I
about, and
feel
I'm like,
like there
oh
was
God,
an
I used to
era
do that all the
where
time. Yeah.
maybe, and I haven't been necessarily keeping up to it, but I feel like there was an era where expensive, right? Because when we're having to produce tape play it, like when the more sort of things you get out the library and even CDs, they're expensive. They were expensive to buy. If you
Yeah.
wanted to buy a whole CD audiobook, it could be $40, $50.
Right.
So I borrowed a few from the library. And in fact, I remember I found Leanne Moriarty through reading her very first book on audio in the car, again, a long journey. And I loved it so much that I was going to the airport, and I listened to half of it from my country town to the airport. And I had no CD player, like I didn't have a Discman on me or whatever. So I bought the book to finish it at the airport. But now, for all, good things and bad things about technology really has advanced audio and made it accessible to
Oh,
a lot more
completely.
people, right?
That's been, I mean, that has really been the huge shift, because, 10 years ago, really the market for audio was library.
Yeah.
And then, one has to remember Audible only launched here 10 years ago. I think it was what, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a shift. And then the phone, it's the digital,
Mm.
it's the accessibility of audio.
Yeah.
Now it's on your phone. And that's changed things, exponentially. So it's no longer, and it's no longer for the visually impaired who would go to the library and,
No, it's for
seek
everyone.
out audio. It is for everyone. Our lives have gotten busier, and it's just easy now. Easy.
We
Just a
also
tap of a button. Yeah.
We hear so much these days about the declining reading rates of Australians, which, as someone whose authoring is their full-time job, is kind of a scary statistic to hear. But then we're hearing, a lot more people are switching to audio, and maybe we're not actually seeing that people are still, consuming books, but they're consuming books in a different way. Because in Australia, we don't have charts that can tell us, if a book's doing particularly well on audio. We just go by the book scan, which is print
Yeah.
only. But of course, there's audio, there's digital and stuff. So, are people reading in different ways? But that brings me to a debate that I often hear on the internet. And I 100%, and I'm sure I know where you stand. I 100% believe that listening to an audiobook is the same as reading a book.
Mhm.
And it shouldn't be disparaged or looked down upon. But you do hear that debate that, oh, listening to audio is not the same as reading books. And how would you sort of argue
I
against
think,
that or
Rebut
respond to that?
it.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think you can really argue it both ways. It isn't the same as reading a book, but it's not, it's simply different. One's not better or worse. It's just I would say it's a different experience. I do think, though, that the great thing about audio is I actually think it's helping people come to books.
that's what I was
People
hoping. Yeah,
who are not actually, who haven't been traditional readers, have come to books and fallen in love with books because of audio, and I think would actually make them think, oh, maybe, maybe I can actually try,
I think
try
so too.
reading. And I do think, you just want people, essentially, the experience that you're getting, the story that you're, it doesn't matter how you're taking in the story.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you are discovering the story that somebody
And
has
each book,
written.
yeah,
Yeah.
and each book brings to you, whether it's read to you or you read it
Yeah.
yourself, each brick, like I love the sort of quote somewhere that, readers are more empathetic people because, they experience the lives of so many
Mm.
different people. And, we can, through reading, you're entertained, but your sort of experiences are widened. You're more likely to think outside the box and think about
Yeah.
how maybe well, I've thought about this, but I haven't thought about it this way. So reading does really sort of give you the opportunity to open your mind to a whole load of different worlds. And that's the same whether it's audio or print. Yeah.
Absolutely. It would be like saying, well, then, if you're reading to a child,
Yeah,
is
the
that a
children,
lesser
true.
experience that
And
if
we're
a
all for
child is
reading to
reading?
children. As a brief
Absolutely.
past English teacher, there is nothing better you can do than read to your children from day dot. Even if it looks like they're
Exactly.
not, you can see the difference in kids who read and
Mhm.
don't.
Yeah, and because the original storytelling is oral, as I'm very fond of saying, Chiara, I'm also interested in what I've perceived to be the increase in audiobooks since Spotify entered the audiobook space. And before we brought you into the Zoom room, I mentioned that the Spotify membership model seems to have brought a lot of people in because, as you said, you can try out an audiobook and without necessarily committing to the whole thing. And I think that that's part of it, is that people they have their 15 hours a month, they can spend 30 minutes on a book and think, I don't particularly like that, and move on to something else. I think this is actually a great development. I know that there can be some chicken little behavior in publishing, which says, well, if the print book's going out the window because that's the model the whole industry's been based on for so long, then that's it. But I actually look at this and think, well, this is amazing, because there are people who are coming to books who might not otherwise, because they've never thought they were for them. And I do find there are a lot of people who get turned off books in high school because of the way they're taught. And therefore, the idea of reading a book just reminds them of some kind of torture they went through in English class, whereas listening.
Definitely.
So
I get that so much from people saying that they just found one of my books or someone else's book and they haven't read for 20, 30 years because they thought books were hard and boring. And this is a way to remind us that it's not. And to go back to maybe primary school when you actually listened and you had fun before they made you start reading in high school books that were not so fun all the time.
No,
but
I
just on
definitely
the on the Spotify,
Spotify.
I'm interested in that perspective.
Spotify definitely is, super exciting because, essentially there are lots of players, lots of other retailers, obviously Audible being the biggest, the main one, but there's Google Play, Apple Books, but Spotify really not only is it accessing a market who are anyone on Audible, they're audio listeners, right? So you've got that market, but you think now how many more audiobooks are being produced? So really, you're not, yes, the market's increasing a little bit, but a lot of people, in terms of, especially if you look at the Audible model, unless you're an avid audiobook listener, you probably will listen to one audio a month, right? Whereas with the Spotify model, it sort of works in twofold, in that, and with their membership, as you say, you could actually listen to more than one, maybe one and a half, or delve into a few. Obviously, I'm not going to go into sort of terms, but Wavesound, because we're part of RB Media, so we're the biggest independent audio publisher in the world. So our catalog has got 90,000. We produce over 90,000 audiobooks. And so we're very important to the retailers. So, and therefore we can obviously leverage certain, certain terms by which you're really getting value when somebody listens to your audiobook and triggers, a sale. There's lots of parameters, and
it's commercial in confidence, and you certainly don't.
It's all of that. Yeah. But
I think you mentioned before. Did you mention before? Like, are you guys available on Spotify and stuff? Like,
yes. So
and
all,
through libraries.
So all our titles. So I guess, and maybe this is our unique, I think, selling points to being published by Wavesound, is that we are a pure publisher. So our goal is to sell as many copies of our audiobooks as we possibly can. So there's no exclusivity in terms of platforms. So we are across all the library platforms. We're across all the key and independent retail platforms. So there's no one that we wouldn't put our can't put our audiobooks on.
Awesome.
So with Spotify, though, they've increased the market because not only are they tapping into a huge membership who may not have been listening to audio before. So exactly as you said, Sophie, there are people who are music listeners, and they're like, oh, I can get an audio as well. Oh, I'll give it a go, right? And so there you might have now suddenly got somebody who now is going to go on to listen to audio. But within that space, they might be listening to more books. So per person, they could actually be a month, they could actually be listening to more audio. So you're triggering more sales. And there are people who have both. There are people who will still keep their Audible, subscription, but also they have Spotify because they want music. And we're creatures of habit. So they're like, oh yeah, but I like the Audible interface. And so
Yeah.
it's just, so each person, I think that's what makes it exciting, is that even if nobody else started listening to audio, each person would actually be listening to more books, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I think the libraries are an important part of that, because for anyone who's not aware, there are audiobook and ebook lending platforms through libraries in Australia, at least. I don't know about the rest of the world. And the difference there obviously is that you can't necessarily get what you want straight away.
No.
No,
Patience is a virtue, my friends.
Although most of our titles, we have a simultaneous model, so usually the lenders can actually listen to it at the same, consumers can listen to it at the same time, so that's also a nice perk.
Yeah. There's so much. I'm imagining you feel optimistic about all this in terms of books and publishing in general. You have come from the print side of things. You're now in this space that I guess the pandemic kicked along quite a bit, because I'm certainly looking at that. That's not when Spotify started making audiobooks available, but I've certainly looked at that time and thought we had big shifts all around in terms of what books were being read, how many different copies of books people wanted, special editions, all those sorts of things, and audio appears to have been an outgrowth of that. But is that fair to say? Is that what you were seeing, or do you think it is more recently that with Spotify entering that's the point which it started to turn?
In terms of you're saying
Popularity.
popularity?
Growth.
No, I think it happened before. I think it really, really happened before. I think the boost was, I mean, we certainly saw during the pandemic, we already saw, we were probably one of the, businesses that did well from the pandemic, because people couldn't get to the bookstores and couldn't get to the libraries. So, but I think it was a very, honestly, I think it was the obviously Audible launching here, but the accessibility and people just knowing about it, and that the podcast aspect, it's kind of all happened sort of at the same time, and it was a very, very quick growth. Then the pandemic hit, and suddenly it was like, right, this is our go-to, and then after that, all the publishers started doing their own audio, and it just also became the talk of the moment. Suddenly the media is talking about it. So I think it's really the awareness, and authors even talking about it. I think it's taken a while for authors. They have an interview and it's all, oh, my book is out there now. Oh, now my book and my audiobook is out. I think it's this. It's kind of a gradual. I wouldn't pinpoint it on one thing. And then obviously Spotify launching, that's sort of more talk in the media. It's that awareness, I think, that people just realize, oh, there's two ways to to read books, listen to books. Yeah.
There's also audio original content from Audible, at least. I'm not sure if you're in this space yet, or if you are you thinking of it?
Yeah.
So our sister company, W1000 in the UK, I think they published about 7 audio originals. Our US team do as well. We heard this first here. We have acquired an audio original, which we'll be publishing next year. So very excited about that. I wouldn't say it's our, I guess, strategy going forward. It's just, the beauty of having, being able to have a list that, you feel you want to champion something. And if it's not getting a print deal, you think, actually, I still think this is a great book and we want to get it out there. And so you're able to do it. I think there are reasons for doing it. There are pros and cons to it, really. There are pros because you might not be able to get a print deal, but I think in terms of discoverability and the audio still still does, ride with the print. As I said, media doesn't really cover audio in the same way that, they'll cover, a print. But so it's, we're all part of the same package. In a way, it's about, the author's book, the audio. So all that helps people find it. Nobody walks into a digital platform, that sort of discoverability of a book. Usually people know what they're looking for. Sure that, the platforms, that's very important. The merchandising will put things in front of people, but, a book, you can even read the first page. You walk into a bookstore, you can dip into something. You have that sort of more choice. Whereas with audio, you're already, putting down the dollars before you've got a chance to really, feel it. So people tend to go with a safe bet or what they've heard about or what. So audio originals are definitely a risk. There are reasons why, Audible, it's a very good strategy for them, because it means, they have it exclusive. So they're, it's how to retain memberships. So there's different reasons to do them, but it's exciting. It's exciting because again, we've actually I think certainly 5, if not more, of the audio originals that were done in the UK by our sister company went on to then get print deals. So but they tend to be sort of made. I don't think it necessarily needs to be this way, but they tend to be made for audio. So say the ones that we did was, involved, interviews with people. And there was like one guy was this military, he had a military background, and he was sort of a fitness guy who now is doing quite extreme things with various, either military government agencies. And then, part of the audio had him, flying out of the plane, and you listen to the audio as he's speaking to somebody, as he's literally. So you're playing with the medium, right? So it's something that is actually, you're actually thinking this is a concept that we want to do specifically for audio. But as I said, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's a shift. I mean, that's an interesting, we don't tend to do dramatizations in the same, say ours is sort of straight reads. You can have multiple narrators because the book might warrant that, if there's, chapters from different points of view, first person narratives by 5 different characters. You need to have 5 different narrators. But in terms of that kind of dramatization where you've got, the sound in the background, more like the podcast, that's sort of a different entity, and again, when we've done it, it's because of the book. We did like Xiang Lu's The Whitewash, and that was written almost like it was a script. It was a sort of a mockumentary, and so you couldn't, that was one. The production, that was a huge production, and we had 14 narrators on that, and it was amazing to work on. And it was fantastic in audio, and we won the audiobook of the year for it. And so it was like, this is worthwhile, this is great. But the book was written that way. We didn't set out to sort of tweak it or make it just to play with the format. And I feel
we're hearing a lot more of that these days. Like, or audio is starting to play with different formats as well as just read a book out.
But I feel that it has to be. I feel very strongly that, if you get a book, a manuscript that's, was written for print, and just to try to do something different just for the sake of it, that for me feels gimmicky, and I think it almost can devalue how great the book is. So I think it has to be done because it absolutely makes sense to do this, and
for the right reasons.
The right reasons. Exactly.
For someone who's been involved in books and publishing and storytelling for a long time, this would be really exciting. I can see that, because you get to play around with the forms of storytelling, and also think a lot about how people are receiving stories these days, because audiobooks, like ebooks, are personal reads, personal purchases, whereas so much of the print market is actually gift purchase. And so even from a data point of view, it would be fascinating to see, I'm sure, what people are listening to, because they're really revealing what they want for themselves and not what we might speculate
true.
they'll buy for someone else.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Well, Chiara, we've had you talking for quite a long time, and,
It's been a pleasure. I could
I'm
talk for ages.
conscious it's the middle of your working day now, and you have 18 titles a month to commission. So, but it's been so interesting. Thank you so much for being so generous with the information that you've given us, talking about audio. As I said, I think it's an exciting time for books. So I look forward to seeing what happens next.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. And
Thank you.
yeah, look forward to listening to more of your podcasts.
And because I've not done the producer thing properly, I failed to tell you before we started recording. I'm now going to put us on pause and say goodbye to you properly. So, yeah, well, I'm putting you on pause. That was so interesting, Rachel. I just feel like there is more to know about audiobooks and more to discuss, maybe future episode. Who knows?
Yeah, I can't wait to see where audio keeps going, because it does just feel like one of those platforms that has more possibilities that we haven't tapped into even yet. And I'm about to go off and download the Rachel John's Book Club audiobook for the month so that I can listen to it on my weekend while I do some other things.
There you go. We're practicing what we're preaching here at Dear Rach and Soph. Listeners/viewers, aka viewers, thanks for joining us. I sound like I'm a TV presenter then. Thanks for joining us. We'll
Thank you so much.
see you another time. Bye.
Bye.